Hello guys, this is Real Recaps. In this video, I will talk about a 2024 American thriller film, The Man in the White Van. Before we start, I hope you will like and subscribe to the channel. In 1970, a woman drives away from her home. As she travels, a mysterious white van follows her closely. When she stops, the driver of the van seizes the opportunity to attack her, attempting to kidnap her. Despite her desperate struggle, the man overpowers her with ease and takes her away. The story then jumps to 1975, introducing a young girl named Annie, who is riding her horse around her family's land. After suffering a bad fall, she heads back home, only to be met with her bothersome mother and sister, Margaret. Her mother instructs Margaret to shave Annie's hairy leg, and Margaret follows through with the task. That evening, during a dinner hosted by Annie's father, Richard, he discusses investment plans with a business associate. At some point in the conversation, Margaret becomes the center of attention, which makes Annie envious. In response, she fabricates a story about a snake that supposedly slithered away from her in the fields, hoping to shift the focus onto herself. However, her mother, Jane, reprimands her before bedtime, warning her against exaggerating her stories. She also threatens to take away her horse if Annie doesn't change her behavior. In 1971, another young girl steps out of her apartment, only to be kidnapped by the same man in the white van. She screams for help, but he swiftly knocks her unconscious. Returning to 1975, Annie and her family get ready for church. Margaret teases Annie, saying she smells like horse manure. Later, after the church service, Richard stops at a gas station to refuel and buy groceries. His son, Daniel, volunteers to get snacks, and Annie decides to accompany him. As they leave the store, the man in the white van watches Annie from his vehicle and follows their family home. Later that day, in the stable, Daniel stands behind their horse, Rebel. The horse grows agitated due to Daniel's presence, but Annie reacts quickly, pulling him away just in time to avoid a dangerous kick. She warns him to never stand behind Rebel, as the horse is easily startled. That night, before going to sleep, Annie prays, asking God to keep her family safe and also to give her a boyfriend before she turns 16. In 1972, a woman steps outside a nightclub for a smoke but realizes she doesn't have a lighter. A stranger offers to light her cigarette, unaware that he is the man from the white van. Before she knows it, she is abducted and later killed on a farm. Back in 1975, Annie leads her horse into the stable for the night. From a distance, she notices a white van and cautiously moves closer to get a better look. Fear grips her, and she quickly runs into the house to tell her mother about it. Margaret, who was present at the time, dismisses Annie's concerns, believing she is making up another story. Even their mother ignores Annie and heads to bed. The next day at school, a popular girl named Joanna teaches Annie how to kiss by demonstrating it on her arm. When Annie's best friend, Patty, is about to try, Annie pulls her away. Annie is then startled when she sees the same white van from the previous night. However, her attention shifts when a new student, Mark, approaches her. Sensing the moment, Patty leaves them alone so they can talk. Surprisingly, Annie and Mark hit it off quickly, discovering they have similar interests, including a shared taste in music. After school, Patty and Annie walk home together. While chatting, the white van approaches them again, causing Annie to panic. She tells Patty that the van has been following her. Patty, acting quickly, picks up a stone and throws it at the van, causing it to speed away. Despite this, Annie remains fearful. Upon reaching her house, she is shocked to see the same white van parked outside. A large man steps out, frightening her. However, it turns out he is just a repairman, not the serial killer. He is there to install a phone line for Margaret. Inside her room, Annie finds Daniel holding a gun. He wants to learn how to shoot and begs Annie to teach him. Reluctantly, Annie agrees to show him. In 1973, a beautiful woman finishes swimming in a pool and walks toward her hotel room. On the way, the man from the white van chases her down with a rope and kidnaps her. Back in 1975, Margaret catches Annie kissing her own arm. Annie teases her by calling her zit face, making Margaret self-conscious. Annie plays some music and glances out the window, only to be shocked when she sees the man in the white van again. A sudden knock at the door startles her, and she rushes downstairs to stop Daniel from opening it. However, when the door swings open, it is only their father who has returned home. The next day, Richard takes Jane out on a date, leaving the children at home. Margaret sneaks out to meet her boyfriend, leaving Annie and Daniel alone in the house. The white van soon arrives, and Daniel runs upstairs to grab the BB gun. He fires at the van but misses his first shot. Annie then takes the gun and successfully scares the van away with an accurate shot. That evening, their parents return home and sense something is off. When questioned, Daniel blurts out that he shot at the white van. When their father asks Margaret about it, Annie exposes her for sneaking out and then explains her own side of the story. However, Richard dismisses Annie's claims, assuming she is making things up again. As a result, he punishes all 3 children for disobeying him. Frustrated, Annie lashes out at her parents for not believing her. Later, her mother comments that Annie has changed ever since they got her the horse. In 1974, a young girl takes her dog outside for a nighttime walk. Unfortunately, the man in the white van seizes her and restrains her with chains. Jumping back to 1975, Annie and her family gather in the living room to watch a TV show together. At some point, Annie heads to her room and is horrified to see the man in the white van standing outside. Panicked, she immediately tells her father. Richard grabs his rifle and steps outside. However, when he returns, he simply says that he shot at a possum. The following day, Annie locks the door and notices that one of the locks is faulty. During dinner, she informs her mother, hoping she will pass the message on to her father. A few days later, Margaret drives Annie and her friend Patty to a drive-in movie. As soon as they arrive, Margaret leaves them to meet her boyfriend. Some scenes in the movie make Annie feel uneasy, and things worsen when Mark and another boy try to scare her. In response, Annie reacts by hitting him. Mark apologizes and then accompanies her to get some snacks. On their way back, they run into Joanna, who is revealed to be dating Mark. Joanna also mentions that she is hosting a Halloween party but doesn't directly invite Annie or Patty. After she leaves, Annie tells Patty they will not be attending the party. However, the next day, Patty calls Annie, trying to persuade her to go. She argues that there will be plenty of boys there and lots of kissing. Annie hesitates due to the white van but ultimately agrees when Patty mentions that Mark had asked about her. That afternoon, Annie seeks permission from her mother to ride her horse to the party. While getting dressed for the event, Margaret enters the room and helps Annie with her makeup, as well as getting her into her Halloween costume. Meanwhile, the man in the white van drives through the neighborhood, searching for his next victim. As the sun sets, Annie and Patty ride their horses toward Joanna's Halloween party. Upon arrival, Annie notices that Joanna is all over Mark, making her feel upset and regret coming. As Annie and Patty prepare to leave, Mark approaches Annie, invites her out, and kisses her. Unfortunately, Patty insists they leave immediately due to her curfew. On their way home, they encounter the white van and immediately flee for their lives. Annie separates from Patty but makes a misstep while riding her horse and falls to the ground. As she lies still, the eerie man arrives, searching for her whereabouts. He steps out of his van and scans the area, wondering where Annie might have gone. After a moment, he gives up and drives away. Meanwhile, Annie remains hidden beneath the van, making sure she is not detected. Once the man is gone, she gets up and begins walking home. Meanwhile, Patty makes it back safely and attempts to call Margaret, but Margaret is too busy chatting with her boyfriend to answer. Annie eventually finds her horse in the field and leads him back to the stable. While preparing him for the night, the man in the white van suddenly appears and grabs her by the throat. She struggles but manages to escape his grip, though she is then beaten and restrained. Despite her weakened state, Annie devises a plan to trap the man. On her signal, the horse delivers a powerful kick, knocking the man unconscious. This gives Annie just enough time to free herself from the ropes. However, the man quickly recovers, forcing Annie to run for her life. He uses his van to close the distance between them and catches up in no time. He then strangles her until she passes out. After a while, Annie regains consciousness and finds herself inside the man's van. Terrified, she launches multiple surprise attacks on him before leaping out of the vehicle. Meanwhile, her sister Margaret remains in her room, still talking on the phone with her boyfriend. Annie reaches her house and frantically yells for Margaret to open the door. When Margaret sees the man chasing her sister, she quickly lets Annie inside. Together, they push against the door and lock it. As they attempt to flee upstairs, the man forces his way into the house and pursues them. Both girls rush to block the next room's door. Then Annie comes up with a clever idea, jumping out of the window. Margaret goes first, but when it's Annie's turn, the man catches her. However, she manages to break free and reunite with her sister. While running, they climb into the man's van and attempt to drive away. Since Annie lacks driving experience, she makes a careless mistake and ends up stuck in the woods. The man arrives shortly and tries to kill Margaret, but Annie slams her foot on the gas pedal, saving her sister just in time. She then accelerates again, crashing into the man and seemingly taking him down for good. When the police arrive, they investigate the scene but find no sign of the man's body. About a month later, life returns to normal, and it appears that Annie and Mark are now dating. Meanwhile, the man in the white van remains at large. He soon acquires another white van, and reports of missing women flood the news. Authorities discover the corpses of the victims. That evening, the man stumbles upon a girl in the woods and kidnaps her. The end. Thanks for watching.